Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, what a glorious bit of weather.
I know.
Got a very, you can't see it so much, but got a very red nose
Yeah,
from sitting out in the sunshine yesterday.
I know. Just being able to, so Becky and I met yesterday and we were able to sit in the garden and it's so good. It makes such a difference, doesn't it?
And going across to Redcatch Community
Yeah,
Garden and just seeing the amazing work they're doing, which is
I
always
know.
so, it just lifts my heart. But
Yeah,
also just seeing families out, being together in the sunshine, it's just what we've been longing for.
yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Really
the
has.
downside is forgetting that we're supposed to put sun cream on.
Yeah.
So feeling just a little bit warm
Oh.
in places. So I was noticing today that yet again this morning in morning prayer, we've got more passages telling us about the law.
Yeah.
And as I just reflect back over the last week or so, there seems to have been a lot in our daily readings that says about the laws of the Lord, the statutes, the ordinances. We've got poor old Job that we're following his story, and he's kind of got this battle against what he believes God's law to be and what he's experiencing. And we've also got a lot of Paul's letters to the Roman, and this is the lawyer Paul speaking to the authority of Rome.
Yeah.
And it just strikes me that, and I often wonder, what is that about? Why at the moment in this season, why is it that we're hearing so much about law?
Yeah.
So that's what's going around my mind at the moment. How about you?
Yeah. And well, absolutely. And I think it's almost, and I love this about the lectionary in that there can be times where it just feels like we're being carried and that's a really important thing. But there's also times where you're like, I know you didn't know this was going to happen, but it's almost like you did in the way that the Spirit works and moves in those passages. Because for me as well, being reflecting so much on the law, it's kind of reminded me of, I guess, almost like God's law versus our country's law, and the law that makes up, where we are in England. Obviously, this could be applied to other places as well. And I think as well, I think what God has sort of striked me is that with God's law, it's this sense of it being timeless and eternal, written and communicated by an eternal God that's in community. We were reflecting on Sunday, which was Trinity Sunday, about God being in community and how it's community, all relationship and community all the way down, including us. And so that law for Moses was written on a tablet. There's something so firm. We can build our lives on that. It's strong and it's foundational. And then I guess the stark contrast to that has been this last year, where, and some people might want to call it guidance, and I understand that, but really it's similar to law, in my opinion. Of We've just had that every week, every month, just changing. And I think maybe particularly for us in the West, where our governments, democracy, even though a different party comes in, the foundations of who we are doesn't necessarily change. That's been really alien for us to have this constant chopping and changing of different things. And we were saying as well that I think I've noticed a bit of a fatigue in people following this, which again is understandable. But I wonder if it's this kind of these moments of uniting, but also, as well as it is with God's law and what appears to be in God's law and what we know, as the same as it is at the moment, it's hard to follow things that feel like they're different to what you want or what you think you should do.
And this is so relevant for us, isn't it? Because we're kind of all waiting for June the 21st to see what is the law going to be.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if society is on hold.
Yeah.
We're having these moments like yesterday where we've got things that feel like normal, but we're still waiting to know what is going to happen on June. What is the law going to be on June the 21st? And Yeah, it is such it's hard to know. As you say, I'm hearing people say, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I cannot do it anymore. If we're not released from this open prison that we've been living in on the 21st of June, I think I'm going to do, I'm hearing some voices, well, I'm going to live my life anyway. Other people who are saying, I don't want it all to come on June the 21st. I don't feel that that's safe. That's not wise. And so there's all of this grappling with what is the right thing to do. And we can't even truthfully say, well, everything we need to know is in the Bible, and that will tell us. Because there are some laws, and the book of the law in the Old Testament is Deuteronomy. There's some laws there that we would say have no context in a 21st century Western world. But I was remarking that I've just got to find it. There's one law that I've always thought of as a bit of a bizarre one, and it's in Deuteronomy chapter 22. And the law says this: if you come across a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with young ones or eggs, and the mother sitting on the young eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall let the mother go, but the young you may take for yourself, that it may go well with you. I always thought that's just a random, irrelevant law. You find a bird's nest on the side of the road. If the mother's there with young or eggs, you can take the young and the eggs, but you let the mother go free. And I was talking about this with Martin Turnbull, a member of our congregation, who is absolutely an eco champion. He was ahead of the game of climate emergency and climate issues even before Greta Thunberg was a twinkle in her daddy's eye. Gosh, that's a bit old-fashioned saying that. I thought we should say a lot. Anyway, digress. And he was saying, no, that is one of the most foundational truths in a green theology. That if we want to talk about sustainability of the planet, people do want to eat meat, eat eggs, but you could take it to any kind of ecosystem. You don't destroy the mother, the parent. Eat the young, eat the eggs, because that's part of an ecosystem. But for sustainability, you don't kill the parent. And he was talking about sustainable farming, that there are those principles of ensuring that there is always, that there is always ongoing availability. He would explain this much better than I. But I hear it, but I was really struck by that even an ancient truth that feels a bit irrelevant has something profound to speak into one of the biggest challenges to our planet. As I say, there's other laws that I think if we had much longer, we might want to kind of dig a bit deeper into some of those laws written of its time in a society where people were oppressed and it wasn't, that there were people that it wasn't considered that people had equal value. And so I wouldn't necessarily want to say, I'm going to live my life by the book of Deuteronomy.
Just get way down and mildew laws. It's like, where do I go?
but just fascinating that there is something to be said about God's truth, God's law for today's society.
Absolutely. And I think the law that we know is about love, and that is about peace, like that, and other ones as well. Those are the ones that remain timeless. And I think that's always the tricky thing, and it's hard to interrogate a book that we love so much, but I think it's so important to our faith that we have a lens that allows us to ask questions, because we have to question what it says about slaves. We have to question what it says about sexuality, about gender, and I think that's a really important thing. And I think if we haven't done that, and maybe we have been too late in that at times, because what happens is in today's society, what we hear, and it's been painful but so important to hear over the last year particularly, oppressed groups that are still in our society speaking up and saying, this law does not work. I think there was recently, as I forgive me that I'm not up on the details, but there was an investigation into the racism within our country, institutional racism within our country, and it said, no, we're all good.
Yeah.
The government was like, no, there's no
institutional racism.
I was like, I think everyone was tearing their hair out. It's like, what? You know, to be able to interrogate those laws and question them. And I think that's the really hard thing as Christians, is what we're called. When do we resist the law? When do we say this is not enough? Because Jesus turned tables, but he also said, give to Caesar what is Caesar.
Yeah.
And so I think we find ourselves in a really hard situation, yet I think we're called to stand in the middle of it and try and grapple.
Yeah, because, you know, it could well be that by the letter of the law and the strictest definition of the term, it could be said by evidence there is no institutional racism.
Yeah.
But there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
So I would say, if somebody stands in front of a double-decker bus and says the NHS is going to be given £350 million a day or whatever it was,
yeah,
to then be told, oh, no, that was just an example of what I would want to say, there's a spirit there that has been broken.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, you might not have stood and said, by law, this is what's going to happen. But there is a spirit of expectancy that something is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we know about scripture and what Jesus came to say was all of those laws that are written on tablets of stone, those commandments are so important. And I bring a commandment on which all of that hangs. And that commandment is that you love God, that you love your neighbour, and that you love yourself too, that you don't diminish yourself in others. And that's come to be known as the golden rule, because so many faith groups would share that as a slightly different wording, but that would be a common thread, a law for the good of all humankind is to love God, love a meaning, a purpose that is greater than yourself, love your neighbour, so take care of those, not just the people that you like, but take care of those around you, and hold yourself as somebody with value and love. And I think of all the stories we heard over COVID over the last, it's like started off the last year, the last 13 months. Anyway,
I keep saying year, but it's like nearly 2
years. Near and a half. The thing I think that struck people the most was how it felt like a deep good that people were helping their neighbours.
Yeah.
That we suddenly remembered something about our identity. That is, we do take care of each other. That is a good and right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the as you were speaking, I was almost reminded myself, Jesus came to fulfill the law in what he did and showed and demonstrated. So to leave us on that, love God, love yourself, love your neighbour, there's a simplicity about that which doesn't hide away from the complexity of the issues that we face today. Doesn't mean that we get to bury our heads, but it also means there is a simple way in which we can follow and step forward when we're grappling with all of this stuff about law and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to behave.
So we will wait and see what June the 21st will bring.
Yeah.
But I just pray that all of us as human beings together will be able to discern what is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
For the good of all. We will find out.
Yeah.
So next week, for our weekly conversation, we have a special guest. So we have, for the next 2 weeks, we've got two amazing students with us from Trinity, Annabelle and James. Next week, Annabelle and I are going to have a conversation, and then you'll be back the following week with James. So watch really this space for new wisdom and insight. But in the meantime, every blessing. Have a good week.
Take care, guys.
We'll see you soon.
See you later.